Right guys, so welcome back to a brand new video here today, and we are going to be reviewing the second test of the F1 2020 season, or the second week of F1 testing, depending on how you want to word it. And this is now done. With the next up is Australia. We are on the way to start the season. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the races do go ahead and nothing serious happens. But in terms of testing, of course, we are going to be talking about it here today. I did do a week 1 review, so if you haven't seen it, then go watch it, guys, by clicking the link up here to go see exactly what my thoughts were on the first week of testing, especially once the Mercedes clone, aka the RP20, was unveiled to the to the sport and to the fans. And yeah, my thoughts on it, and also my thoughts on the first week of testing, Mercedes, DAS system, and all that other good stuff. But today we are here for the second week of testing, and quite a few things have happened in the last 24 hours, and also over the 3 days as well, and a lot of things are worth talking about. So let's jump into it and let's see exactly what happened. So we are going to break it down team by team, and we are going to start things off with Mercedes. And Mercedes had a pretty decent second test, pretty low key compared to the first one, because of course the DAS innovation has now been put behind us, and we know what they've got on their car, and they have been told that they are legal to race it this season. So Mercedes just went about their test as usual. Bottas and Hamilton having a pretty good test all the way through the 3 days, with the exception of one day in which they both had engine troubles, and there seems to be a theme here where Mercedes have got an engine gremlin, and they seem like they have a very fast car. They're very confident, they feel like they can push the car to the limit, but the reliability at the moment isn't there. If you combine that with the multiple retirements over the 2 tests that also Williams had, with Latifi and Russell, especially Latifi, it seems like Mercedes do genuinely have a bit of an engine gremlin, and a few shoes in to sort out before Australia, because it seems like their car isn't the most reliable on the grid right now, and that is something that they might be concerned about, especially the fact that Bottas and Hamilton had issues on the exact same day. I believe it was day 2, so they weren't too happy about that, and I think they've got something to worry about. Other than that, the pace looked good, of course, and they were quickest in both tests in the end. Their overall lap time spoke for themselves, and they are probably a team to beat going into Australia if you had to put smart money on it. So Mercedes looking good, but a couple of engine issues along the way. We're now going to move into Red Bull, and these guys are a bit of a dark horse package with Red Bull. I feel like they really haven't shown anything yet. They believe they're about 2 tenths off Mercedes pace, make it possibly 3. They do have an upgrade plan for the first race in Melbourne, which would hopefully cut that gap down. But Red Bull very low key. The rumours in the paddock are that they do have a very fast car. They've just kept it very toned down. Having said that, their car is very, very nervous. Everyone that I've seen from videos and clips, and also trackside feedback, their car seems very nervous, and that kind of has been confirmed by the amount of spins, and incidents Verstappen and Albon, especially Verstappen, have had over both tests. I think they're by far the team that's definitely had the most spins and, like off-track moments over the 2 tests. You could put some of that down to weather conditions, but just generally, the Red Bull have had the most spins. So it does kind of add up to the fact they've got a nervous car, but it seems like if they get it right, they've got a very fast one. Also, Honda, very strong power unit, no reliability issues for them. They seem pretty bulletproof, and the pace looks good. So if I'm a Red Bull fan, I'd feel pretty confident that you're going to be at least a top 2 team at the first race in Australia. Now talking about the prancing horses, Ferrari, and they seem to have again a pretty solid test. It was all going pretty well, and then they hit the headlines yesterday right at the very end, in which there was a statement put out by the FIA in which they mentioned that Ferrari and the FIA had reached a settlement over the engine investigation from last season. Now there's been a lot of rumours about this because it has remained confidential, and the only thing we know is that it has remained settled pretty much between the FIA and Ferrari. The details have not been made public, so there's been a lot of speculation as to what has happened and what details are. Personally, if I had to guess, I think Ferrari found something that wasn't illegal, but it maybe wasn't legal. It was a proper grey area loophole that maybe there was nothing in the rules about it, whether it was legal or illegal. There's something completely new that it has happened before in the past, where teams find something that isn't in the rule book, and of course you can't say it's legal or illegal. It's kind of in the middle. So I feel like Ferrari, they lost a bit of engine performance in the last couple of races last season, which is when they were being investigated, and Mattia Binotto in pre-season has spoken about how Ferrari do have more aerodynamic parts in their car, and they're a bit more draggy, so they're a bit slower on the straight. So I feel like it kind of adds up that they may have settled with the FIA to maybe change the way things work. They do have a second oil, I believe it's an oil pressure test device to see what the pressure is, and since they've put that second one on, Ferrari have kind of had to remove whatever trick they were doing and go back to a kind of, I won't say older, but kind of a bit more basic engine arrangement, especially with the oil. That's where the trick is. They do something clever with the oil, and that explains why they had such good straight line speed and they were so fast last season on the straights. So it seems like they've now had to get rid of that system, and the FIA have decided not to take punishment because it wasn't illegal or legal. It was kind of in the middle. Bit of controversy about this because obviously other teams are asking what it was and whether they should pursue action, so we'll never really know the details. Either way, I'm going to put this in the same category as maybe the DAS system with Mercedes. I feel like it's one of them things where, again, the FIA will let them have it this season, but it has been banned for next season because it's one of those things where it's a loophole, grey area, where it's not really legal or illegal, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I feel like it's just teams being clever, and the FIA are slowly clamping away, because the new rule for 2021 is that any of these new innovations are probably going to be deemed illegal if they seem to be a bit of a trick. So yeah, other than that, Ferrari had a pretty strong test. They racked up a lot of laps. They had a pretty bumpy first test with retirements. Sebastian Vettel broke down on the second day. He was ill on the first day. They did say they got to the bottom of the issues in the first test. They know exactly what it is, and they have already fixed it. So Ferrari looked really good. You can see maybe they lack a bit of pace, but the reliability is there, which is good for them. And I feel like with Ferrari, I've got a funny feeling they're sandbagging a little bit. I've seen some of their onboard laps. It tells me that they're not quite pushing completely, that they're braking a little bit earlier than everybody else. They're kind of missing apexes a little bit more than everybody else on purpose. And just a few things here and there that seem a bit off to me. So I feel like Ferrari could be sandbagging a bit. Do I think they're sandbagging enough to be first? No way. I still think they're going to be the third quickest team, but I think they will be quicker than Racing Point, who we'll move on to next. And speaking of Racing Point, of course, they had a very strong test once again. They seem to be able to lap very consistently in those kind of mid to low 117s, with any tyre really. Both drivers in the car seem very comfortable. They racked up a lot of laps. And surprisingly, even though they got a Mercedes engine, they didn't have any major issues with it over the two tests. They were the only teams to not have any problems. So Racing Point getting away with potential engine reliability issues there. But either way, I think they are a dark horse. You'd have to fancy them as the fourth quickest team, without a doubt, I think. Possibly third. I'm not quite sure if I'm buying that one yet. I feel like Ferrari are holding something back, but Racing Point look good, and there's not much to really say. They put a lot of laps in, a lot of mileage, they look consistent, and that's what you want from a team that's in the midfield at the minute. Now, talking about McLaren, which is going to be the next team, they're a bit of a funny team as well. I feel like they're sandbagging a little bit here and there, because over the second test, they said, for example, the C4 tyre wasn't a good tyre for them, which of course, if you translate the C4 into what tyre it would be, it's basically the soft tyre. They said it's not a good tyre for them, yet they did still set their best lap on the C4 and not on the C5, which is considered to be the ultra soft, kind of, if we're going back to the old tyres. There's a bit of an indication there that says maybe they're holding something back. Again, they got a lot of good running in. It does seem like Renault have actually got on top of their power unit. If you look at Renault and also McLaren, both teams, very strong pace, good straight line speed, and solid reliability. Obviously, the engines are turned down in pre-season testing, so we have to take that into account. But having said that, compared to past seasons, Renault and McLaren used to break down a lot in pre-season, so this is a good sign for them. And I think genuinely seems like that Renault have taken a step forward in the power unit, which is really, really good for both teams. And McLaren, their car seems really strong. Apparently, sectors 1 and 2, according to data, looks very good for them. Sector 3, they could do better there, apparently. Apparently they've got some pretty high expectations themselves in terms of what they want to achieve, and both McLaren and Racing Point, according to data, were seen to be letting off a little bit in the third sector. So when they were on good laps, they would kind of lose half a second in the third sector alone. So it seems like they could be saving a little bit here and there, because it seems like this year the midfield is very, very close between Racing Point, McLaren, Renault, Alfa Tauri. So there's a lot of chess games going on in terms of no one wants to show who's quickest, so they're kind of all holding a little bit back at the minute. But yeah, the midfield looks very, very interesting this year. We then move on to Renault, and again, a solid mileage for both drivers, no reliability issues for them, and Ocon and Ricciardo, I fancy them as a pairing. They looked very strong, the pace was good. Ricciardo was quickest on the final day in the morning session. He got pipped in the end by Verstappen and also Bottas, and he was third quickest, but still a 16.2 on the final day from Ricciardo's pretty good pace in a Renault, and they seem like a good package this year. Again, it seems like the improvements to the car look good. They still haven't revealed their livery yet. I'm expecting to be exactly the same as what they have run in the last 2 seasons. But still, I like what I see. Reliability is good for them, which is one thing that has really let them down in the last couple of seasons. Even when with Red Bull, when they were their engine. So yeah, for me, Renault look good. I like their lineup, and I think if they can find something with the car a little bit more, they could actually be a dark horse, I think. And that maybe the paint scheme is very reminiscent of the fact that they are a dark horse, because it seems like there are some rumours in the paddock that they could be doing something very right, and that car could be a little bit of a lethal weapon. So we'll see in Australia what happens. We then move on to Alpha Tauri, and again, a very solid test for both cars and drivers. It seems like the midfield teams actually have some better reliability than some of the top teams. We've seen Ferrari and Mercedes with a couple of issues, and the midfield team is just quietly going about their business. And Alpha Tauri, again, you got to fancy them to do well. They've got a lot of parts from Red Bull this year, especially like we said before, the rear end of the car is all from Red Bull. Seems like this year they've got more than ever though. The front end seems very similar to last year's car, and some of the barge board area. And also, like I mentioned with Red Bull, they do have the Honda Power Unit, which this year looks, again, better than ever. Very reliable, no issues over both tests, and a lot of miles. And they apparently do have a better high-end mode, so like a better party mode when it matters. It's going to be extremely tasty. That midfield battle is going to be unreal. And I think the smart money's on Racing Point, because they've cloned Mercedes' car, and you can't bet against last year's championship car. Having said that, McLaren, Renault, and also Alpha Tauri look very impressive. And then we move into the lower half. I feel like this year the midfield is going to be a little bit of a split. I feel like we're going to have those 4 teams that I mentioned, and then we're going to have Haas, Alfa Romeo, and Williams. We're going to kick things off though with Haas, aka the Ferrari clone from last season. But it seems like, again, they seem to have a bit of inconsistency, a couple of incidents here and there. The second test definitely went smoother than the first one, but it does just seem like maybe they're not as quick as last year or the season before. They're definitely not the 4th or 5th quickest team. I think they're lacking a little bit. I think the philosophy of last year's Ferrari car, combined with maybe the lack of experience as a team in the sport, could be hindering them a little bit. So we'll see where it goes. If I had to put money in it, I don't know where Haas lie. I did predict them to be last in my pre-season predictions before any running was done. I didn't fancy them to do that well, and it seems like I might not be a million miles away, but it's definitely looking like the Ferrari customer teams have some issues, because Alfa Romeo as well, who are Ferrari customer, they seem to got some good running in. They were definitely better in the second test. It seems like, according to rumours in the paddock, they are saving a little bit for Australia. They have got some parts in the car that they haven't run, that they know are going to do better. They just kind of kept their cars close to their chest, because if you look at the Alfa Romeo, it's pretty average compared to last season. Like, not much has changed since Abu Dhabi at the end of last year, so they need something. The pace seemed good. Robert Kubica was quickest on the first day of the second test, which was really impressive. 16.9 in the Alfa Romeo, really good pace from him, and yeah, really good signs from Alfa Romeo, but still kind of, I feel like they haven't got much more in the tank than what they've given. I feel like we'll have to wait and see what happens there with them. But again, good test for both drivers, Giovinazzi and Raikkonen, and Kubica getting in solid mileage on the clock, and a couple of spins here and there for Raikkonen, especially at the final corner once. But other than that, a solid test for the Italian-Swiss team. And then finally we move into Williams, and Williams is an interesting one for me. Day 3 of testing, like, if I bring it up real quick, it kind of went under the radar, but George Russell with a 1:16.8, a very good lap, much quicker than what he done in qualifying last year, and only 6/10 off Bottas's time. Massive improvement for Williams, it really is, and he was quicker than both Haas cars and Kimi Raikkonen in the Alfa Romeo, who was the only Alfa to run on that day. So this is what I made in my predictions. I feel like Williams could be ahead of Haas this year. I had them in 9th place, so second from last, and that could be the case. The stats look good for them. I like what I see. Latifi's a bit of an interesting one, because he did have the worst luck when it came to reliability and testing. He had a lot of breakdowns. It's a bit of an unknown yet with Latifi as to what he can provide. He is a rookie, of course, but George Russell, we know he's got the minerals. He's an F2 champion. He beat Lando Norris and Alex Albon to the championship, so we know he's a good driver. And last season he did show signs, like for example at Hungary in qualifying, and it looks better this year for Williams. It really does. I like what I see, and there could be more in the pipeline, who knows. But the final day of testing was really telling, with Bottas first, Verstappen second, Ricciardo third, Leclerc fourth, Hamilton P5, Ocon in 6th, and then we've got Perez, Sainz, Russell and Kvyat rounding out the top 10, and Grosjean just outside in 11th, and the top 11 were covered by 0.8 of a second. So it could be some things to come. I feel like this is going to be a very close season, and I feel like if Mercedes, unlike last season where they pulled up at Australia and they were 7/10 clear than everybody else, I feel like if Mercedes this year don't have that, and then maybe 1 or 2 tenths quicker, but like generally the jump isn't as big, we could be in for a very exciting season. I feel like, you know, you're going to have maybe, my prediction is you're going to have Mercedes versus Red Bull, Ferrari versus Racing Point, and then you're going to have Renault, McLaren, maybe Racing Point. That's the interrogation mark. I feel like Racing Point are the real dilemma here. I'm not quite sure where I am with them, but you got Ferrari versus Racing Point, or Racing Point versus McLaren, Renault, and Alfa Tauri, and then you got a lower half with Williams, Alfa Romeo, and Haas. That is what I would predict, I would say, in terms of the pecking order going into the first race at Australia. But guys, that's going to be it for my week 2 of testing review here today. Give me your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll be, you know, excited to hear what you guys have to think, and also I'll get back to some of you guys as well in the comments. But the next race is Australia, and you can guarantee I'll be doing a preview of the race on the channel, so get subscribed for that. There's going to be plenty of real life F1 sport content on the channel this season, because I'm no longer doing the Pit Lane podcast. So yeah, stay tuned for that, guys. So yeah, leave a like on the video, subscribe if you are new, and also turn on notifications to not miss any content from me over the entire F1 season. And also check out these 2 videos on your screen if you have missed them. But other than that, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on my next one very soon. But until then, it's goodbye from me.